Welcome to Washington in Focus. I'm your host, Brett Davis, the Center Square's Washington State Editor. Joining me today is Center Square reporter Timothy Schumann, and we're going to talk about everyone's favorite topic, high gas prices in Washington State. How much are you paying for gas, Tim?
It varies. If I hit a good day on Costco, it's, only like $4.90, $4.95, but the local gas station down the street for me is closer to $5.25, $5.30.
So at the end of last month, the Department of Ecology held its third carbon auction of the year, and preliminary results were just released. For those who don't know, these carbon auctions are part of 2021's Climate Commitment Act. Basically, that means Washington's cap and trade program requires emitters to obtain what are called emissions allowances equal to their overall greenhouse gas emissions. These allowances can be obtained through Ecology's quarterly auctions, kind of like stocks and bonds. So how much money was brought in this time, and what was different about this auction?
I believe it was just under $550 million was brought in this time. And this was the third auction, as you mentioned. However, in between the second and the third auction, there was they called it an allowance price containment reserve auction. It was a, planned emergency reserve auction where they're auctioning off additional credits because the price of the carbon credits went too high in the second auction.
So basically, they're trying to minimize price volatility.
They're trying to minimize price volatility. However, even the Department of Ecology admitted in their last newsletter that our prices in Washington are over double the recent closing prices of auctions in states like California or Quebec, where there are other, carbon auctions.
So this latest auction, I think the actual figure is closer to like $541 million. We get that figure by multiplying the price of the allowances, which is $63.03. by the 8.585 million allowances that were sold. So that's how we get that $541 million number. But like I alluded to in the opening, there was something different about this auction. Can you go into that?
This auction was also the first auction where entities were allowed to sell shares. They call it on consignment. Consignment shares are shares that entities have held either through previous acquisitions in other auctions or in the case of a certain subset of shares, they were granted to the entities by the legislature at the inception of this program. And so those entities were things like public utilities, natural gas, electric, heavy industry, things that consume a significant amount of energy or require a significant amount of energy to continue their productive output, like, lumber mills or steel mills.
What's the purpose of these consignments? What are they hoping to achieve ultimately?
The purpose of the consignments is to essentially allow these businesses to continue to operate. And ostensibly, I believe these funds are to be used to reduce the impact of the climate pledge auctions on the actual consumers of the goods and services when it comes to utilities or,
So it could help reduce customers' bills.
It's in the legislation, the actual RCW, the Revised Code of Washington. That is what is laid out for specifically electric and gas utilities. I haven't had time to look into the industry side of it. I forget the acronym they use, but I'm not exactly sure what the restrictions are on spending those funds. However, speaking with Claire Boyd-White, the Department of Ecology specialist for the carbon auction, she basically said that whatever's in the Revised Code of Washington is what has to follow, and that all of that is not overseen by Ecology, that there are other departments that handle that, and that's not their purview to track how those funds are spent.
So I did a little bit of math, adding up all the money that was brought in from these four auctions, the three quarterly auctions and the special allowance price containment reserve. So the first auction brought in about $300 million. The second one brought in about $500 million. And the third we're talking about here brought in $541 million. And the special allowance price containment reserve auction brought in $62.5 million. So they've brought in so far more than $1.4 billion. So now we're talking about real money.
Yeah. And I believe if you total that up, that $1.4 billion, that's roughly $5.8 million per day in additional. They don't want to call it a tax, but it's an additional tax burden. It's not like companies that are being levied these fees are not passing it on to the consumer. I think anyone who's bought gas in Washington State in the last 6 months knows that, something's afoot.
Right. Now, you recently come across some information about another special allowance price containment reserve auction. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So the allowance price containment reserve essentially is triggered when the price goes too high. And both the first time that happened was in the second quarterly auction. And this third quarterly auction that occurred the last week in August also triggered the allowance price containment reserve. So there's going to be another auction that is happening. And I believe it is sometime in late November. Early right. November 8th.
Okay. And when does the next regular quarterly auction take place?
The next quarterly auction is in December. I believe it's December 6th.
Right. So it looks like we're going to have a total of 6 auctions by the time the year is out, if my math is correct.
It does look that way. And if the trend continues, it looks like it'll be close to $3 billion.
That's a lot of money. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Timothy Schumann, this is Brett Davis. Please subscribe and thanks for listening.